Spam, a word that evokes strong feelings. Some people love it, some people hate it, but everyone recognizes it. Cheap, salty, and long-lasting, Spam is more than just a canned meat product. It's a cultural artifact, a war ration, a symbol of resilience, and, for some, even a delicacy. While today it may sit quietly on the lower shelves of supermarkets, often overlooked in favor of fresher or trendier foods. There was a time when Spam, quite literally, helped feed millions and shape the course of global events. Its story is far greater than just what's inside the can. It's about survival, marketing genius, and the unexpected ways food intertwines with history, politics, and culture. When Spam first appeared in 1937, it was marketed as an affordable convenience for American families. The Hormel Food Company, the brand behind Spam, knew the world was changing fast. The Great Depression had left millions struggling, and the idea of a cheap, ready-to-eat meat was revolutionary. Spam was pork shoulder and ham mixed with water, salt, sugar, and sodium nitrate. Simple ingredients that made for a product that could stay fresh for years without refrigeration. But simplicity was the secret. It was practical, and practicality sells. Within just a few years, Spam became one of Hormel's best-selling products, a staple in American kitchens and cocktail parties alike. But Spam's true rise to global prominence came not from kitchens, but from battlefields. When World War II broke out, the US government needed food that could be shipped across oceans, withstand extreme climates, and nourish soldiers who had little time or means to cook. Spam fit the bill perfectly. President Franklin Roosevelt's Lend-Lease Act in 1941 opened the floodgates, sending not only tanks and ammunition abroad, but also millions of cans of Spam. To Soviet soldiers, it became Roosevelt sausage, and to the British it was both a blessing and a curse. A reliable source of protein, yet one that wore thin on the palate after years of rationing. Winston Churchill himself once remarked that without Spam, Britain might not have survived the war. This salty pink block of meat had become, in its own way, a weapon of war. Nikita Khrushchev, the future leader of the Soviet Union, even admitted in his memoirs that Spam kept the Red Army alive. In his words, "Without Spam, we wouldn't have been able to feed our army." For an American product to find itself sustaining Soviet troops in their fight against Nazi Germany is more than just a footnote. It's a striking reminder of how intertwined food and geopolitics can be. Even beyond Europe, Spam shaped diets and cultures across the Pacific. On Guam, after US forces recaptured the island from Japanese occupation, Spam was handed out in mass quantities, quickly integrating into local cuisine. Today, Guam consumes more Spam per capita than anywhere else in the world. It's on restaurant menus, at McDonald's, and on family tables. In the Philippines, Spam was introduced by US troops and lives on in dishes like Spam salog, fried Spam with rice and eggs. And in Hawaii, laws restricting Japanese fishermen during the war reduced access to fresh fish, leaving Spam to fill the protein gap. Spam musubi, a block of rice topped with grilled Spam and wrapped in seaweed, remains one of Hawaii's most beloved snacks. But Spam's story doesn't end with war. In South Korea, during and after the Korean War, Spam became both survival food and a luxury. Initially supplied through US military bases, Spam soon found its way onto the black market, fetching high prices and becoming a status symbol. Over time, it embedded itself into Korean cuisine, most famously in budae-jjigae, or army stew, a dish born from desperation. Mixing kimchi and noodles with Spam, hot dogs, and American cheese. Today, Spam gift sets, packaged elegantly with oils and sauces, are given as holiday presents, sometimes costing over $100. A humble can of pork transformed into a luxury commodity. Of course, not all of Spam's cultural legacy is flattering. By the post-war years, its ubiquity made it an easy target for jokes. In Britain, it became synonymous with cheap, repetitive meals. Most famously mocked in Monty Python's 1970 Spam sketch, where a group of Vikings sing spam, 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 endlessly in a cafe that serves little else. From that sketch, the term spam entered computer slang in the 1980s to describe unwanted, repetitive messages. The digital junk that clogs inboxes today. In other words, spam gave the world not just food, but also one of the internet's defining terms. But to reduce spam to either war rations or comedy would be unfair. It represents something more complex. The ingenuity of industrial food production, the ability of a brand to adapt and survive across decades, and the strange ways consumer goods become political tools. Spam has been celebrated, vilified, mocked, and revered, but it has never been ignored. So today, as we revisit spam through both history and taste, we confront a paradox. How can something so ordinary have had such extraordinary impact? Is spam simply a salty reminder of desperate times, or is it a symbol of endurance, a culinary survivor that continues to find new relevance across cultures? To answer that, we must start at the beginning, with the company that dared to can America's future, the Hormel Food Company, founded in 1891 by George Hormel in Austin, Minnesota, was a modest operation at first. George, who had worked in Chicago's brutal slaughterhouses, built his own meatpacking business from the ground up. The company sold not only meat, but also hides, wool, and eggs to make ends meet. By World War I, Hormel had achieved financial success through dried sausages, but the 1920s nearly destroyed it. In 1921, George's son, Jay, discovered that the company's assistant controller, Cy Thompson, had embezzled over $1 million, the equivalent of $21 million today. It was a scandal that threatened to bring down Hormel entirely. But Jay stepped up, ousting corrupt executives and revitalizing the business. By 1926, Hormel launched America's first canned ham, soon followed by canned chicken. But Jay knew the future wasn't in expensive meats. It was in cheap, mass-market innovations. Pork shoulder, once a discarded cut, became his secret weapon. He ground it, mixed it with seasonings, sealed it in a can, and in 1937 launched Spam. The name chosen at a New Year's Eve party contest, allegedly inspired by spiced ham. Jay's gamble worked. With aggressive marketing, radio jingles, magazine ads, and cooking contests, Spam went from curiosity to sensation. By 1940, just 3 years after its debut, 70% of Americans had eaten canned meat, up from only 18%. Spam wasn't just food, it was an American phenomenon, and soon it would feed the world. By the early 1940s, Spam had already secured its place in American kitchens. But it was World War II that transformed this pink block of pork shoulder and ham into a global icon. When President Roosevelt signed the Lend-Lease Act in March 1941, 9 months before the US formally entered the war, America committed to supplying its allies with food and weapons. This wasn't just about tanks, rifles, and ships. It was also about calories, nutrition, and the ability to keep armies fed on distant battlefields. Spam, by design, was perfect for war. It didn't need refrigeration, it was compact, cheap to produce, and could be eaten straight from the can. For military planners, it was a dream. a meat ration that could be stockpiled, shipped across oceans, and distributed quickly to soldiers in the field. For millions of men and women in uniform, it became a daily reality. Whether they loved it or hated it, they could not escape it. In the Soviet Union, Spam became known as Roosevelt sausage. Soviet General, later Premier, Nikita Khrushchev admitted years later that Spam was vital to their war effort. He wrote, "Without Spam, we wouldn't have been able to feed our army." It's a staggering statement. Here was a future leader of the USSR acknowledging that an American canned meat was instrumental in sustaining Soviet troops against Nazi Germany. In Britain, Spam was often the only meat product that families could reliably access. It was a welcome relief for ration-weary households, though the monotony of eating it day after day led newspapers like the West Sussex Gazette to report by 1944 that Britain looked forward to the day when a Spam-weary world could see pre-war menus again. The truth was inescapable. Spam was everywhere. At its peak, Hormel was producing 15 million cans per week. US soldiers often joked bitterly about it. Ham that didn't pass its physical or meatball without basic training, they called it. Soldiers scribbled verses about Spam in trench notebooks, while comedians in USO shows lampooned it on stage. Some men wrote home begging their families to send anything other than Spam. Yet despite the jokes and the weariness, Spam kept showing up, meal after meal, base after base, front after front. And while it may have been mocked, Spam was indispensable. The logistics of feeding millions of troops across 2 oceans were almost unimaginable. Fresh meat spoiled quickly. Supply lines were vulnerable. Spam, in its small, sturdy can, became a logistical miracle. By the end of 1943, the US military had ordered more than 150 million pounds of it. In effect, Spam became as much a part of the American war machine as jeeps, helmets, and M1 rifles. But it wasn't only the military that experienced Spam's reach. Civilians in war zones also felt its presence. In the Pacific, particularly in Guam, the Philippines, and Okinawa, Spam became a substitute for traditional protein sources. When the US recaptured Guam in 1944, Spam was distributed widely to locals, who incorporated it into their cooking. The Chamorro people of Guam adapted Spam into their cuisine so seamlessly that, decades later, it still dominates local dishes. Guam today consumes more Spam per capita than anywhere else in the world, averaging more than 16 cans per person each year. It's on the menu at McDonald's. It's in stews, rice dishes, and even wedding feasts. In the Philippines, Spam arrived with US forces in 1945. Over time, it merged into the Filipino breakfast table as Spamsalog. Fried Spam, garlic rice, and eggs. It remains a popular comfort food across the country. On Okinawa, Spam consumption skyrocketed and remains high today, with more than 7 million cans consumed annually. The Japanese even created a mascot, Spamyakun, to promote the product. Hawaii's story is more complex. Unlike Guam or the Philippines, Hawaii was never occupied during the war. Yet its food culture was transformed by US policies. Because the US government distrusted Hawaii's large Japanese population, it restricted their ability to work as fishermen, stripping away much of the island's access to fresh seafood. This created a protein gap, one that Spam eagerly filled. Out of necessity, Spam entered Hawaiian cuisine and never left. Today, Spam musubi, grilled Spam atop rice, wrapped in seaweed, is as Hawaiian as poke or shaved ice. Sold everywhere from gas stations to fancy restaurants, It reflects how a wartime necessity became a cultural mainstay. But Spam's role didn't end with World War II. It returned to the battlefield during the Korean War. In South Korea, food shortages were catastrophic, and Spam once again became a lifeline. Yet its story there took an unexpected twist. Unlike in Europe, where Spam was common but sometimes resented, in Korea, Spam became a symbol of status. American bases tightly controlled supplies, and Spam was often smuggled to the black market. Prices soared. For many Koreans, Spam became a luxury item, something reserved for the wealthy or for special occasions. Even today, Spam gift sets, often bundled with high-quality oils and sauces, are given during holidays, like Chuseok and Lunar New Year. Some can cost more than $100. Perhaps the most famous Korean dish involving Spam is budaejeje, or army stew. Created from desperation during the war, it blended American rations like Spam, hot dogs, and cheese slices with Korean staples such as kimchi, tofu, and chili paste. What began as survival food is now one of Korea's most beloved comfort dishes. Eaten not out of necessity, but out of pride and tradition. The story of Spam in Asia shows how something intended as a temporary wartime substitute became permanently ingrained in food culture. For some, Spam was simply survival. For others, it became heritage. It is rare for a single product to transcend continents, wars, and generations in this way. Yet, while Spam was celebrated in some corners of the globe, it became a source of satire in others. In Britain, Spam fatigue turned into comedy. The Monty Python sketch of 1970 immortalized Spam as the butt of a joke, with a group of Vikings chanting "Spam, Spam, Spam" endlessly in a cafe. This sketch didn't just mock the ubiquity of Spam. It accidentally gave the English language a new word. In the early days of computer culture, enthusiasts used the word spam to describe repetitive, unwanted electronic messages. By the 1980s, spam had become a permanent part of internet vocabulary. An American canned meat had shaped not just food culture, but digital culture as well. This dual legacy, as both survival food and punchline, remains central to Spam's identity. For every place where Spam is revered, there is another where it is derided. Yet, this contradiction may be why it has endured. Spam is more than just meat in a can. It is history preserved, not only in sodium and pork shoulder, but in memory, survival, and adaptation. And yet, we must ask, why did Spam succeed where so many other wartime foods disappeared? Why is Spam still sold in more than 40 countries, consumed in millions of households, and featured in cookbooks, festivals, and even luxury gift boxes? The answer lies not only in its practicality, but in the marketing genius of Hormel, and in the way Spam adapted to shifting cultural and geopolitical landscapes. To understand that, we need to look deeper into the strategies that carried Spam from Depression-era Minnesota to the dinner tables of the world. When World War II ended in 1945, many wartime rations quickly disappeared from kitchens. Powdered eggs, canned bacon, and dehydrated vegetables were relegated to history, remembered mostly with a grimace. But Spam was different. Unlike other military foods, it had gained not just familiarity, but genuine cultural footholds across multiple continents. That staying power didn't happen by accident. Hormel was determined to keep Spam in the public eye. Back in the US, soldiers returned home with mixed feelings about Spam. For some, it was a reminder of the battlefield, a food they wanted nothing more to do with. For others, it had become a taste of nostalgia, a connection to the camaraderie of wartime meals. Hormel knew they had to walk a fine line, marketing Spam not as a reminder of military rations, but as a versatile, family-friendly staple for the peacetime household. To achieve this, Hormel unleashed a wave of creative advertising. Spam wasn't just meat in a can. It was marketed as miracle meat, capable of transforming any meal. Magazine ads showed happy housewives frying Spam slices for breakfast, layering them in sandwiches for school lunches, or cubing them into casseroles for dinner. Hormel pushed recipes that promised efficiency and modernity, themes that resonated strongly in post-war America, where convenience foods were increasingly associated with progress and the kitchen of the future. But Hormel didn't stop there. They created live entertainment to promote the brand. Literally, in 1940, the company launched the Hormel Girls, a traveling troupe of 60 women who had served in the military during the war. These women formed an orchestra and a drill team, performing across the country in parades, civic events, and even on their own radio show, all while promoting Hormel products, especially Spam. For nearly a decade, the Hormel Girls served as both entertainment and advertising, a living symbol of patriotism and modern womanhood. It was a marketing campaign unlike anything the food industry had ever attempted. The strategy worked. By the 1950s, Spam was once again booming in sales. But what made it unique was how differently it was perceived abroad compared to in the US. In many parts of Asia and the Pacific, Spam had become an ingrained part of daily diets. In America, it became increasingly associated with working-class families and rural households. Some praised it as affordable and reliable, while others mocked it as cheap and lowbrow. This divide in perception would only deepen in the decades ahead. In Hawaii, Spam had transformed from wartime substitute into cultural identity. By the 1950s, Spam musubi was already appearing in local shops, and today it's considered as iconic as pineapple or shaved ice. Hawaii even hosts an annual Spam Jam Festival in Waikiki, where tens of thousands gather to celebrate the canned meat with dishes ranging from Spam fried rice to Spam ice cream. In Korea, Spam's status as a luxury item persisted into the 1970s and beyond. Gift sets of Spam became a tradition, often presented in elegant boxes lined with silk. For South Koreans who grew up during food scarcity, Spam was not just food. It was a symbol of survival and upward mobility. Even now, a high-quality Spam gift set can cost more than fine wine. In Britain, by contrast, Spam never escaped its wartime stigma. The monotony of eating it during rationing years made many Britons weary of it for life. Yet, even here, Spam endured in peculiar ways. School cafeterias served Spam fritters well into the 1960s. The Monty Python sketch of 1970 cemented Spam as both a joke and a cultural reference point. Ironically, what could have been disastrous publicity instead kept the brand alive in public consciousness, even if as satire. And then came the internet. In the 1980s, early computer enthusiasts adopted the word spam to describe unwanted, repetitive electronic messages, drawing directly from the Monty Python sketch. By the 1990s, the term had entered mainstream vocabulary. Today, billions of people around the world encounter the word spam daily, often without realizing its origin lies in a humble canned meat. Few products in history have managed to infiltrate both global cuisine and global language. But beyond jokes and nostalgia, Spam continued to adapt to shifting markets. In the 1980s and 1990s, Hormel began introducing new varieties to appeal to changing consumer tastes. Spam Light, with less fat and sodium. Spam, hot and spicy, Spam teriyaki, Spam with cheese, and even regional flavors like Spam tocino in the Philippines or Spam garlic in South Korea. These weren't gimmicks. They were strategic moves to ensure Spam stayed relevant in cultures that had embraced it. Today, Spam is sold in more than 40 countries, with over 8 billion cans consumed since its invention. Hawaii, Guam, South Korea, and the Philippines remain some of its largest markets outside the US, while Britain continues its love-hate relationship with the product. Yet Spam's survival isn't just about marketing or cultural adaptation. At its core, Spam represents something deeply human. Resilience. In times of scarcity, Spam provided sustenance. In times of conflict, it fueled armies and civilians alike. In times of peace, it reinvented itself as comfort food, luxury gift, or comedic symbol. It is both mocked and adored, both humble and iconic. Few foods in history carry such contradictions, and fewer still remain as relevant nearly a century after their invention. As we move deeper into the 21st century, Spam finds itself at another crossroads. With growing concerns about processed foods, sodium levels, and health, its future may seem uncertain. Yet, at the same time, nostalgia-driven markets, food fusion, and cultural pride continue to fuel its demand. Spam is no longer just a product. It is heritage. And perhaps that is Spam's ultimate secret. It is not defined by what's in the can, but by the stories it carries. Stories of war, survival, comedy, adaptation, and identity. But this leads to a final, lingering question. In an age of fresh, organic, farm-to-table dining, can a canned meat from the 1930s still hold a place at the global table? Or will Spam eventually be remembered only as a relic of the 20th century? Spam is more than just canned meat. It is, in many ways, a time capsule, a small, rectangular container holding the struggles, creativity, and contradictions of the 20th century. From its invention in 1937 as a solution to surplus pork shoulder, to its role in sustaining armies across World War II, to its unlikely elevation as a luxury gift in Korea and beloved comfort food in Hawaii, Spam's journey is unlike any other food in history. It has worn many faces. To American GIs, it was both a blessing and a burden, fueling survival, but also monotony. To civilians in war-torn Europe and Asia, it was sometimes the difference between hunger and a full stomach. To Hawaiians and Filipinos, it became woven into culinary tradition, transforming into Spam musubi or Spam silog, dishes so iconic that they now define national identity. To the British, it is remembered with a mixture of nostalgia and ridicule. Immortalized in the Monty Python sketch that gave the world a new word, Spam. What makes Spam truly remarkable is its ability to adapt. It shifted from wartime necessity to post-war convenience food. It embraced global cuisines by reinventing itself in local flavors. It even leaned into parody, turning what could have been negative publicity into a quirky kind of immortality. How many brands can say they've influenced both culture and language? Of course, Spam has its critics. Health advocates point to its sodium content and processed nature. Food purists dismiss it as cheap or artificial. Yet the product continues to thrive, not in spite of these criticisms, but because it has embraced its identity. Spam never pretended to be gourmet. It is simple, affordable, and reliable. In a world that often glorifies complexity, Spam's honesty is its strength. Looking toward the future, Spam faces both challenges and opportunities. As consumers demand healthier and more sustainable options, Hormel may need to innovate further. perhaps with plant-based alternatives or reduced salt varieties that appeal to new generations. At the same time, nostalgia remains a powerful force. Millennials and Gen Z are rediscovering Spam not as a survival food, but as a cultural artifact and even a retro-cool comfort dish. Social media is full of creative recipes, from Spam tacos to Spam ramen hacks, keeping the brand relevant in ways its original inventors could never have imagined. Ultimately, Spam's story is one of survival, not just in the literal sense of feeding millions during scarcity, but in the metaphorical sense of enduring relevance. Few foods last beyond their era. Spam did, and continues to, because it adapted, because it traveled, and because people in every corner of the globe gave it new meaning. So, can Spam hold a place at the global table in the 21st century? The answer is already here. It never left, whether stacked neatly in Hawaiian grocery stores, gifted in Korean holiday boxes, fried up in Filipino breakfasts, or joked about in internet memes. Spam is not just surviving, it is thriving. Spam is history you can taste. Spam is culture you can eat. Spam is, love it or laugh at it, unforgettable. And that is why Spam, the humble miracle meat in a can, will never truly disappear.